Luna, how do you feel about family? Hi, this is Camber.
Hi, this is Nakisha, and you're listening to Wise and Weird. Episode 2.
Episode 2.
How are you feeling about it?
I'm feeling like it came really quickly.
Really quickly.
Yeah. Like, was it yesterday we recorded the first episode? But I'm really excited about this one for sure.
I am too. This one's going to be pretty deep. And the forecast is also pretty deep as well. So it will be kind of supportive in those energies, I feel like. But yeah, shall we get into the astrology forecast?
Hell yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So we'll start off with Sun in Taurus. Sun in Scorpio. Okay, we're redoing that
I
whole
was like,
thing.
wait, excuse you.
I just want to take over the whole show.
Just totally dismiss me. I love that.
Just like the sun is where I say it is, okay?
Okay. Get in line.
Sun in Scorpio, excuse me. It's your time for a moment. The sun in Scorpio. So right now is when the veil is the thinnest between us here in the 3D world and the spiritual world, or however you want to think of that. But the veil is the thinnest right now. And that's why we have Halloween when we do. Because those communications and things like that can come over more easily. And Scorpio is a very supportive time for those type of energies. Sun in Scorpio is a really good time of deep reflection and intuition going inwards and just really reflecting on just everything, the deepest things, because with Scorpio, it's all about transformation. So you want to look inward and you'll have these realizations, or like I said in the last one, things can be exposed, creating these transformations within you. So yeah, very transformative sign, very intuitive, in depth. And yeah, so that's Scorpio, Sun in Scorpio, which we are in now. And we also have, this one was really cool. So on November 4th, we will have a new moon in Scorpio. And new moon is always a really good time to celebrate. So a lot of people at the full moon, that's when they'll make goals that they want to build on or see come to fruition. But really, new moon is the more ideal time to do that because the moon's small, getting bigger. So it's more, what goals do you want to see get bigger or come into fruition? The full moon is big, getting smaller. So it's, what do you want to let go of? And or what's getting in your way of having those goals is more like full moon type of vibe. So new moon in Scorpio. So new moon is going to be new cycles, new projects, new goals. So it's a great time, with it being in Scorpio specifically, it's a really good time for going inward and working on your own self-exploration so that you can have those like epiphanies or big realizations of change. You want to work on letting go of habits, patterns, even addictions. It's a really good supportive time for that. And debts. Debts really came to mind on this one. There's a certain aspect with it that I'll get into in just a second that has to do with like finances, actually. So you just want to ask yourself, where do you have self-destructive tendencies? Mm.
Dun, dun, dun.
And how can these be changed? Yeah, Scorpio gets deep, man. And it's a great time for working through your fear, because fear is actually really associated with the Scorpio sign as well. So yeah, it's a really good time for working through your fears around those patterns or habits or tendencies, maybe. So one aspect here that has to do a lot with, finances. This is why I said with your debt specifically, you want to get right with it. Okay.
I'll let them
So,
go. Someone else can have them.
oh my gosh, you would too. You could just like let go of anything and be fine. And I'm over here just like, ah. Oh my gosh, fun fact. I never even thought about this. We have opposite sun signs. Scorpio is yeah, Taurus is your opposite sign.
What? Really?
Uh-huh. Yeah,
That's
we're opposite.
amazing. That makes total sense to me.
That doesn't mean that the signs are actually like so different that they're opposite, but we're opposites in that it can be like a challenging type of relationship, but usually your opposite sign, it's kind of, there's challenges there or they stretch you, but it's a really good when you stretch me, girl.
Don't tell Tor.
He's gonna find out in this recording and be like, what? But it can be challenging, but there's a lot of reward in those relationships. So, which we don't have to tell Tor about that either. But so with this new moon in Scorpio, it's also opposite. So it has an opposition to Uranus and Taurus, or Uranus and Taurus, however you want to go about that, which Taurus and Scorpio are already opposite sides. So it's kind of interesting. But so Taurus is all about money, finances, your home, comforts, your work. They're a really hardworking sign, but they're also really about luxury too. They'll play as hard as they work, for sure. But with this opposition, that's where I was saying you want to be careful with your finances, because Uranus is the planet of surprises and realizations, rebellion, breakthroughs. It's the planet of sudden changes. And so a lot of these things, these sudden changes or surprises can happen specifically in your finances or your possessions, things that are dealing with Taurus, right? And then with Scorpio, with the presence of Scorpio there, anytime there's a presence of Scorpio, it has a way deeper meaning behind it as well. So just be careful with that. And debts, pay attention to your debts. If you have any, just try to work on those things. That might be something to help add to your transformation. And then last thing really quick, Mercury was in Libra last time. Mercury's still in Libra until the 5th of November, where it will transition. Oh, yeah, Mercury will transition, let's see here, into Scorpio on the 5th. So it'll be in Scorpio the 5th to the 24th. And then I believe Thanksgiving's the 25th. 25th, Libra will then, I think so. I think I looked it up today. I never know ahead of time when holidays are anymore. And then, so Mercury, it's the planet of communications, intellect, things like that. But I thought it was kind of interesting to look up when Mercury is going to be, where Mercury will be around Thanksgiving time, because that's going to be, communicating with your family, sitting at the dinner table and having these conversations. So I was like, what is it going to be in? So Mercury will transition into Sagittarius the day before Thanksgiving. So that'll be kind of interesting. Sagittarius is very philosophical. So I don't know. It's going to be interesting. People will be talking about your podcast.
Yeah.
Family dynamics. Let's get into it.
And then transition, family dynamics.
My hard transitions.
I think that was great. Yeah, to end on that. I am really just thinking that this is a good time to talk about family dynamics. I know you brought up that, because of Thanksgiving, maybe we should talk about some family things, because I know it's not the easiest time of year for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
And me and you have talked about this is probably our most talked about subject outside of astrology. Because we have such different family dynamics and growing up and relationships with our parents and siblings, etc. So
We
yeah.
do. And I think it's really cool that we do, because I know that when we've had conversations about this previously, it's like such a different perspective. Um, Also, just really quick, as far as like sibling order and stuff, you're the youngest by a lot, right? In your family
Yeah.
dynamic? Okay.
By
And I'm
9
the
years.
oldest.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm the oldest by a lot. So, um, yeah. So I thought it would be really cool to talk about. And yeah, especially around the holidays and stuff, because it isn't always the easiest for a lot of people. No one really has a perfect family. I don't believe it anyway. So there's always like some type of pattern or dynamic or person that kind of gets up all in the mix there. So let's talk about it.
Yeah. I
um,
like that you said that. I don't believe that people have perfect families either. And I say that coming from a place of like being a kid who grew up thinking I had a perfect family. Um, and then, yeah, just like as you get older, all of a sudden, like things come to fruition, and it's like, oh shit, like that is not what I thought it was. And
yeah.
your naivety as a child, or your family protecting you, or whatever it is that's keeping you with that, you know, part of you that you, or that part of your family that you're just like not. I don't know. I felt like I was an outsider in a way because it's like, oh, I didn't know this was happening. I didn't know that was happening. And then as you get older and just learn more about your family, it's
It's so
hard.
weird, huh? I think that happens to a lot of people actually. Like as kids or even young adults, we don't know what's like actually going on. And then as you get older, you start realizing like, oh, the family's actually split because this aunt and this uncle don't talk to each other. So their kids don't. Or like there's so many different things that kind of pop up that you're like, oh my gosh, I didn't know it was like that. And yeah, I've definitely had that in my family dynamics for real. So I get that. Yeah.
So maybe we should start off with like just our family structure.
Yeah. Do
So for
you?
you, you said that you were the oldest, that you are the oldest. You grew up being the oldest. Is that still the case?
It's so weird because no, it's not still the case now. And you know a little bit, you know about my story, somewhat, right? So somewhat actually, we talk about this all the time. So yeah, I grew up as an only child, mostly. So that was really interesting. And that was just a whole different dynamic in itself, which I actually really loved being an only child. Was able to just really easily entertain myself and stuff. So I was fine with it. Everyone was like, you need a sibling. But eventually I started really, really wanting a younger brother. And I got him. So my brother was born when I was in ninth grade, which technically is in high school everywhere else. I always forget that though, because in Utah, it's ninth grade, you're in junior high, right? And then 10th grade, you start high school. But everywhere else, and like out here and stuff, it's ninth grade is high school. And then my little sister is pretty close after him. She's quite a bit, she's a lot younger than me too. And but they're really, really close in age, maybe like a year and a half apart. And we don't have the same dad. We have the same mom though. So I'm the only one as far as like my family that's from like the same mom and my same dad and my same dad. So it's just really interesting because when it comes to order, yeah, I was the oldest for a long time and like by a lot. And then when I was 26, And I was actually with Sakara, and she was like, let's go get a poster board. We're going to write on it and we're going to find your dad. We're going to post it on social media. And I'm like, we are? She's like, yeah. So that day we went to the dollar store and I went and wrote on the poster board, like, this is my dad's name. If you have any information, please let me know. And I thought it would take like months for information to come in, if anything even came in. And I remember we went for a hike after that. And right after the hike, I checked my phone and there's a message from my sister Miranda, just like, hey, I think we're sisters. That's my dad. And I was like, what? And it had only been like a few hours. So in finding my dad's side of the family, I found out that I'm one of 10 just on his side. And so when you include that whole gang now, I'm the second to oldest on my dad's side. So there really wasn't a way for me to answer that just like super quick and short.
Yeah, no, I love that's why I asked it for sure. I find it so fascinating. I remember that happening. And even like a fun story, right? As I was working in a town in Draper, Utah, and getting my coffee, right? I was getting my coffee from this guy for like years. And then all of a sudden I see a picture of you and him up, and you're like, that's my cousin. And I just thought it was like, oh my gosh. It's because you didn't know that part of your family.
I didn't
Until
know.
you were an
Yeah.
adult.
This whole time you were interacting with my cousin Marcus. That is so cool. Shout out to him. He's so cool. Like, I'm so glad we're cousins. Like, he's awesome. And yeah, so you knew him the whole time. And that's so weird. Yeah, I totally forgot about that. I posted that picture and you're like, wait, you know him? I'm like, yeah, that's my cousin.
My long lost family.
That's so cool. So my first time actually getting together, because Miranda, the one that my sister that wrote me first, she was the one that I like met up with first. And it was just her and I that met up. Well, and her kids. I got to meet my nephew and my nieces, which was awesome. So I automatically became like an aunt. I found all kinds of family with that. It wasn't just siblings. It was like cousins, aunts, uncles, nephews, nieces. So I have all this whole new family. But anyway, yeah, so I met up with Miranda first. And then it was maybe a couple weeks later or whatever that I actually met up with more of the family. We went to a brunch and they got to meet me and stuff. And while we were there, one of my uncles, like, it's my dad's brother, he was like, wait, do you know Earl? And that's my uncle on my mom's side. And I was like, wait, yeah. And he was like, that's my dude. Like, we've been working together. He gets on Facebook and shows me my cousins on my mom's side. He and they all know him. They love him. They're like, oh, that's so cool. He's your uncle. Like, we love him. So this whole time, my two uncles, my one uncle on my dad's side, my one uncle on my mom's side, knew each other this whole time, but we didn't know that there was this connection. And then just really quick too, there's another connection there where my sister Miranda found the post because someone that I went to junior high and high school with posted, reposted my post or whatever. And on her timeline was my sister Miranda. So it didn't have to go very far at all. And my sister Miranda actually grew up with this girl that I went to school with. She didn't go to the same school as us, but they grew up in the same neighborhood. And so they were childhood friends. It's just wild. It goes to show Small Lake City.
Small Lake City. Indeed. It's like,
like what even?
I know. People run into each other all the time. It can be good and bad, I think, for sure.
For me, that was a huge thing though, because I was like, I don't want to start dating someone and find out they're my sibling.
Yeah,
that was straight up a legit, you want to talk fear, girl? Like, that was straight up a legit like concern. I'm like, I don't know who my dad is. Like, that could very well happen. So luckily it hasn't happened. There was a cousin that I matched with on there was a cousin on a dating site that I matched with though. This was like years before. This is actually like, years before like meeting my actual family and doing this whole post. And we were writing back and forth. We were supposed to go on a date, and then he just ghosted me out of nowhere. And I was like, oh, and I was kind of weirded out because I thought things were going really, really well. Like the conversation was really good. And so I thought that was super weird. And then a couple years later, after like adding all these family members on Facebook, I see that he like, it's like mutual friends and it's all my family. So I'm like, he's got to be a family member. And I found out later that he's a cousin. And I was like, I wonder if he like found out and then ghosted me. I don't know, super weird. But yeah, I can't wait for that family reunion. That will be cool.
Yeah, I know. I think like it's kind of a joke, right? Like for Salt Lake City, because everyone has such big families, or did. We were known for having massive families. I have so many people who have, yeah, I know so many people that have like 8 to 12 siblings, and it's just a normal thing. I'm just like looking at, I'm like looking at my vulva. No, thank you. But like, yeah, I even my mom, I think me and her talk about this all the time of just like I wonder if people, how do you know who's your cousin or whatever, or your brother and sister? There's so many. I feel so I have a question for you. Like, what is it like getting your face? What is it like getting siblings like that much later in your life? Because I know there's a lot of sibling dynamics and that's a huge part of people's life, but like getting them that much later, did you feel instant connections with them, or was it more like strangers and you just friendships that you're nourishing now?
Yeah, that's really interesting question. And it was really interesting to navigate because I met up with Miranda, right? And we're hanging out and stuff. And I'm just like, this is weird. It's like you're making a new friend, but then it's deeper than that because you share these genes with them. Like it was really weird. So yeah, that's a really good question. It's definitely interesting because we didn't grow up together and we didn't have that like sibling rivalry. We didn't fight like siblings typically do as they're growing up, or whatever. We kind of missed out on those like childhood type of bonds or like early adulthood even. And so by the time I'm like finding them, we're like creating our own families now and like having our own kids. But it's been really awesome. Like it's been interesting because there's so many siblings that I do have different relationships with each of them. But I definitely click with, like, it felt like it clicked with some, and there's actually some that I still haven't met either.
I know that. Yeah.
Yeah. The oldest, I haven't met her. I don't know. I'm not sure if we will, which is kind of weird, but I mean, we'll see. She knows about me and everything, but I mean, and then I have another brother, and we've talked over Facebook and stuff. We haven't met yet, but it would be really cool, like, to meet up sometime and have him come here and visit, or like me, meet him when I go back to Utah sometime. And he has a son, so it'd be really cool to get to know my nephew because he's adorable. But yeah, it's been really interesting. And then, like I said, it's not even just the siblings either. It's been like the cousins that I have relationships with too, like individual relationships with and clicking with. But it was really interesting though, because like growing up biracial in Utah, that was a huge thing that affected me. I always looked different from my family growing up. My mom, she's a white woman. She has green eyes and she's got blonde hair, and well, she dyes it blonde, but still, I mean, that's what people see. And then my little brother, my little sister, they've got like blue eyes, blonde hair. My stepdad. So we would go out and then my mom had me super young too. She had me when she was 16. So she always looked a lot younger and we looked closer in age. So people always thought I was just my mom's friend when we would go out. Like she would get like hit on in front of me and stuff. And it would just be like people would have no idea she was my mom. So it was really weird. I didn't grow up with like that representation in in Utah in general, in the schools or classrooms that I was in. and then within my own family. And so once I found my family and like saw these pictures of all of them, I was like, oh my gosh, like I look like them. It was
Mm.
it was really cool. And it's been really cool to get to know them. And, you know, even though we're in different states and stuff like that now, I've formed some really, really strong connections with some of those family members for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, that has to be pretty profound, like finding, I mean, you guys would have had more of similar experiences than even your brother and sister that you grew up with living in Utah.
Mm-hmm.
So that's got to
Yeah.
be nice to like be able to have a community of people now that you can talk about that stuff with.
Right. Yeah. Because I didn't, they identify with me a lot more on stuff like that. And I never even knew that I was missing that. Like, you know, you get so
Mm-hmm.
used to stuff or whatever. I just, there's certain things that I wasn't really exposed to growing up, or, you know, things weren't really talked about or whatever. And so it's really interesting, like having that now, with that side of the family. It's been really cool, and it has been really profound and like impacted me a lot. It's totally life changing. It's changed my life for sure. So that's my family dynamic.
Love it in a nutshell in 10 minutes.
It's so hard. Like I'm trying to like compact everything, but it's just like there's so much to it. There's so much there.
And we talked about this before we started recording, is like we are already, for our listeners out there, we do have these conversations where like this family dynamic is so intense and there's so many different facets of it that it's like, is an hour even enough? Like, could you even talk about enough stuff, you know? And even in your 10 minutes or whatever, I feel like so many other little things come up that you can talk about, right?
there's so many other things like, wait, what about, hey.
Spend an hour
Yeah.
on like missing, like an entirely missing parent, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
like that's a whole thing.
That's a whole thing, girl.
Yeah.
That's a
Yeah.
whole thing. Yeah. I want to know, I want to know more about your family dynamic now.
Yeah, for sure. I think the one thing we probably have in common is that we kind of grew up like only kids.
Mm-hmm.
Because of the age gap, it's really different. Like you don't have those bonding moments as a kid, like, oh, when you're 12 and 14 together and you like still bikes and go somewhere. Like I didn't have that. You know, I think my siblings, um, I have four siblings, so there's five of us total. And that's another thing we have in common. None of my siblings are full blood. We have different parents. So I'm the only one from my parents. And yeah, they're older. My oldest brother is 14 years older than me, 15 years older than me, I think. And so he had a son when I was 6. So I had a nephew. I started having nieces and nephews when I was 6 years old. Me and my nephew actually
Wow.
went to elementary school together. So
Weird.
yeah, he was in
Oh, cool.
kindergarten and I was in 6th grade. And so I felt like I was in the middle of my nieces and nephews and my brothers and sisters. And so I did have my nieces and nephews around a lot as I got older. Um, but yeah, we all have different parents. And that was interesting because they all have brothers and sisters, other brothers and sisters that I don't know, but like I would hear about, you know, their other families or whatever. And so that's
Hmm.
really an interesting dynamic where I did grow up hearing about my brothers and sisters, like other families. Um, and it's not that it bothered me by any means, but I think about it now and it's interesting that they had other siblings that I don't know anything about. And yeah, my parents stayed together. I knew my parents. I knew who they were. But they stayed together until I was like 20 or 21. And so they were pretty solid. I had a very high, I held both my parents in very high regard. Um, Maybe even to a detriment. honestly, thinking that they were perfect people for quite some time and holding them to quite a high
Yeah.
standard. But yeah.
That'd be hard. Yeah. They were together for so long.
Mhm.
And yeah, I mean, they didn't get divorced until a little bit later on. How did that affect you?
It was really devastating because they neither of my parents are really big on like talking about feelings. I don't think anyone in our family truly is, to be honest.
Mhm.
So it wasn't, I didn't find out about it. Well, it was actually kind of funny how, well, it's funny now how it happened, but me and my closest cousin, we were on a camping trip and then we were drinking and I was like 20, 21, and then he just like nonchalantly said something about it and I had no idea my parents were getting separated. And so he just like looked at me and he was like, oh my gosh, like, don't tell anybody. I'm going to get in so much trouble. And I like played it off like I already knew. I was like, no, no, like, I know, I know. And then I instantly called my mom and I was like, what's happening? And I was
Oh
like upset
no.
about it. Yeah. Yeah, it was pretty devastating because I think that's probably a big turning point for me realizing that like families aren't perfect. I got to be in my little bubble and like no one talked to me about those things, which was also detrimental in me trying to have relationships because it's like, wait, why aren't these working out?
Yeah.
But yeah, so I was so young and my siblings kind of treated me like they protected me, not treated me. They protected me a lot. Like I think everyone in my family just didn't tell me things a lot of
Mhm.
times. And so I felt very protected and I felt very loved by everyone. And I was kind of in that bubble until it bursted. And then I was like, okay, like people struggle. My parents are struggling. They have emotions. They hurt. They're sad. They're depressed, whatever. I hadn't really seen that or understood that before, being like 20.
Yeah.
Reflecting though, like knowing that now and reflecting on my childhood, it's like, oh, it was there. I think I just didn't know what it was because everyone would like kind of not talk about it. you
That makes
know?
sense. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's a little less like crazy for sure. But yeah, I think it got a little crazier as we got older. Like
Mhm.
for sure. Just having now my mom is remarried and I love her husband too. And then my dad is with someone. And so like having those dynamics too is just interesting. Um, the woman that he's with doesn't have any kids. So like I don't have any sibling relation on that side. And my mom married someone who has three daughters. But we were so much older that it's like we don't talk or anything like that. So technically I guess
Yeah.
I have three step sisters, but I think I've maybe talked to them like a couple of times and my mom's been with Mark for quite some time. So it's
I have
interesting.
step siblings too, and I completely forget. We don't interact at all.
Well, it gets hard because it's like it's that obligation too, right? Like there's so many obligations in life as you get older, or it feels like it. And it's like, how are you just, I don't know. Like I feel like I had boundaries and when I was older of like, hey, I have the people I like in my life. Not that I want to like shut everyone out, but yeah. It's like, oh, just because like we're married into the family doesn't mean we should be obligated to be best friends now. They're great. They're really wonderful girls. Or women. And I, yeah, I just don't know them very well, you know?
Yeah. Well, with it happening later on, that,
Mhm.
yeah, I mean, that makes sense. You get caught up in your own life. People are busy. They're starting their own families, kind of like I was saying with my siblings. So it makes it really interesting to like form those relationships later on or like when you're already an adult.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it really does. I think like with siblings, especially, I never had that, felt that bond that people talk about, you know? I've talked about that with Sakara as well. I feel like she's just going to be like our ghost third co-host. We bring her up all the time.
I know.
um, but I talked about it with her too, because I had a lot of connection issues with women in my life because I struggled with like connecting with my sisters. And on a really, really deep level, like the way that I hear, like, I don't know, other friends talk about their sisters is like, oh my gosh, like that sounds like such a beautiful thing. And I'm like, I
Hmm.
want that, you know? And so I had a hard time with that. And like female relationships for sure, like friendships. So I think my family dynamic affects a lot of my female relationships and like um yeah, I think that's pretty common though. Your family dynamic is like your number one network, right? You grow up with that before you start socializing outside of your family dynamic. So it really does lead into a lot of like your future relationships with girlfriends, boyfriends, like romantic relationships, platonic relationships, and every relationship, honestly.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. And that's a whole different episode to get into, but I know it's definitely affected me both. I have, father, well, I guess I have like daddy issues and mommy issues. So it's played a huge role in my life and relationships I've had and friendships. So I totally get that. Um, yeah, and relationships with women. And my sister and I used to be very, very close. My sister on my mom's side. We were really close, considering the distance, the physical distance, because we've lived in different states pretty much the whole time. I lived at home with them for a tiny little while she was a baby, but that was about it. And I've been on my own for so long. So we were, separated by so many states and such a huge age gap. But even then, we were still very close. It was just a different type of relationship. But now, you and I have talked about that. We don't have any kind of relationship now. I'm hoping that eventually changes in the future at some point. But, right now it's just not really there. And it's really hard. And I think that has to do with like my relationship with my mother has kind of trickled down and affected these like female relationships I have, as far as like with my sister and even some like female friends. So when you said that about, having your it interferes with your, well, not interferes, but affects your female relationships. So it was like, yeah, I totally get that. I've I have that as well.
Yeah, for sure. And I
Yeah.
think with family, like you're raised with them and you're around them all the time as you grow up or not. I mean, you don't have, obviously they could be absent. But if you are, I don't know many families. Mine didn't talk about boundaries, right? Or like within the family unit. And so it's
Hmm.
like, I remember growing up with the whole kind of saying, like, you always show up for family. Like, family is family, no matter what.
Yeah.
And that was really hard for me to like unravel that. I don't know if you had that same messaging as you were growing up at all.
Um, I want to say yes, but it was conflicted. I grew up with a mom that said that family was everything, but her actions didn't really show that family's everything.
Sure.
I'm just gonna be real here. I'm just gonna be real.
Just getting on
Um,
it.
but that was my experience. That's my truth. That was my experience is um so I grew up feeling like you I grew up feeling very intensely about family and like family foundation and structure and stuff, but I didn't really have that myself like modeled for me. But you're kind of more talking about like the other side of it, or like more extreme, where it's like a lack of boundaries there. So yeah, I didn't really have that actually. Um, yeah, you're more talking about like family is family. You stop everything for them. You like,
Sure. Yeah. I know
yeah,
that was a big thing for me, is like learning that later is really difficult. Like my parents would do anything for me and for their kids and for a lot of the people in our family for sure, and did do a lot for a lot of people. And I wonder as an adult, like as I get older and people ask me for help, but I'm like, no, I don't know. Like not everyone I say no to, but it's like, no, like at what cost though?
mm-hmm.
Reflecting on my family, it's like, what did it cost my parents to be that way? You know, um, did it cost happiness? Did it cost their happiness together? Did it cost health issues? Did it cost, relationships? Just to like
Yeah.
always be families first. And like I've obviously at this point in my life gone to a lot of therapy. As I know
Same.
yeah. And like tried to work through a lot of different things because I grew up feeling very obligated to perform a certain role in family. And I think that's like one other thing we really wanted to talk about is like our roles in our family for sure. Now that plays into like
Yeah.
your adult life.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I would be curious though, like what do you think like your role was in your family?
I don't want to say what initially comes to mind. I don't think it was always this way, but I definitely feel like my role now is I've become the scapegoat.
Mm,
Um, but like I said, I don't think it was always that way. My mom and I used to be actually very, very close when it was just her and I. It was like us against the world kind of thing. And that was just a completely different dynamic. It was like a different lifetime when I think about that now.
yeah.
But my role, I don't know, because being the firstborn and being like so far ahead of my other siblings, you would think it would be more like the leader, the initiator, and I feel like I've tried to step up to that role, or I feel like that should be my role. But that wasn't really honored or respected. Anytime I tried to like take the lead, or anytime I had a difference in opinion, or anytime I like, was out of line, or I don't know, it wouldn't be appreciated. It was more like punished. And so for a while I actually became really like timid and insecure and didn't really use my voice or speak up. So I felt like um, my role was supposed to be something more of like the leader, the protector, because I was the firstborn. Um, that's kind of hard though, because things changed so much in high school, around like high school time for me, that my role totally changed. And
Sure.
maybe in answering that question, what I'm doing is like looking from their perspective instead of answering it from mine, is what I feel like I'm actually doing right now. But yeah, I don't even know how to like answer that really. I guess just the the different one. I'm kind of like the black sheep, I guess. I was like always different, I felt like.
Sure.
Um, and none of those are really super like positive roles. So I'm trying to like figure out, I'm like sitting here thinking like what's like something better to say, but I don't know. I guess
Well, I
that's
don't think
my
it's about saying what's better to say, just what
I
is
know.
the honest truth for you, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, that's the honest truth. But I'm curious. I kind of want that question back at you now, because I'm curious what your role is in your family, or has been. Like, has it changed?
I feel like it is. I'm not sure that it's ever changed. I feel very much like the in my intermediate family with my brothers and sisters and mom and dad, that I very much was the one that was not disappointing. Like that, I'm not saying all of my brothers and sisters like messed up every day of their life by any means, but I felt like I was definitely the one always being told, like, you're our last hope. Um, or I never have to worry about you. You're always okay. You always follow the rules. You're always doing well. And I was always like keeping the peace, not rocking the boat. And I would say up until about 26 or 27, I was like maybe playing into that role too, like the savior, with one of my siblings.
Mm.
Like, yeah, I didn't realize that's what I was doing and how that benefited me even. But I would show up whenever that person would call, and be there, 1 in the morning, 2 in the morning, whatever, and do all this stuff because like I was the good sister. Like I'm the good one that shows up and has my shit together enough to be there. But it
Yeah.
really was eating at me, and it really like messed up a lot of stuff in my life. Like I didn't, again, boundaries, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And taking that on and feeling like I was failing if that person wasn't getting better or whatever. But I would never really like rock the boat in any way whatsoever. But to a detriment too of just like, I think about that on this podcast. Speaking of like family dynamics and not rocking the boat, is like I have changed my name, but
Yeah.
I know a lot of family members, right? I haven't told my family, like officially told anyone yet. And so it's like if they start listening to this, that's like how they'll find out.
I was wondering about that. I was going to ask
Yeah.
you. Yeah.
Because I'm not entirely sure how they'll react to it or not. It's really interesting. Like I feel like I have a lot of
Mm.
expectations put on me. Um, and sometimes I feel like that's a little like unfair because it's like, oh, like my bar is so much higher um, to meet. And also, I feel like I can easily disappoint because that expectation that I'm not disappointing is there. I felt
Yeah,
that
I
way
was
a
going to say
lot.
that that puts a lot of burden on your shoulders. Like, even when you're just saying that, I was like, oh my gosh, that like puts a lot on you. I feel like
Yeah.
that's how I would
Especially
feel.
when you have like that deep, deep love for your family. And like my parents
Yeah.
and me have like a really, really close relationship. So it is like really difficult to decipher that. I think having heavy, or not heavy, but like strong boundaries with the people you love the most has got to be one of the most challenging things I've ever done in my life. Like,
So challenging. I'm still working on this. Like, it's
yeah.
just an ongoing, it's hot, and that's tough. Yeah.
Yeah. And that was one of the things that I wanted to like bring up too, is like for so long in my life, I had this idea that love meant that you understood that person. And that's just not the case. Like in
Mm-hmm.
my mind, it's like I don't understand where my dad's coming from sometimes, or my mom, or my sisters, or my brothers. Like I don't always understand, but I do love them. And I think vice versa, I would like to have that same feeling returned, where it's like you don't have to understand what I'm doing, like changing my name, but
Mm-hmm.
just respect that autonomy and like love me.
Yeah.
And to be fair though, I think talking about fear. I'm so scared to like tell certain people like, "Oh, I changed my name." Maybe they would react great. I'm so scared to do it. I don't know. So I'm not giving them the opportunity either.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. Like, I see what you mean. You're not giving them the opportunity to react how they choose to, because you really don't know how they feel about it or how they'll react to it yet. Um,
Mhm.
Yeah, that's interesting though. I wanted to ask you about that because it was like, oh, on the podcast, I'm saying Camber and stuff. And I was like, I wonder like if yeah, she's like,
Yeah.
let them know about that. Um,
Like, we're just gonna jump in. It's fine. It's whatever.
I
I'm
know
gonna
we're
very privately exploit myself.
just putting this all out there. So
Yeah.
um it's like, well, thank you for recording with me. We're going to go ahead and delete and re-record this whole episode. um
This will be an
yeah,
interesting to listen back to. It'll be,
gosh.
yeah.
Yeah.
I can
It
feel
will be.
like as I'm talking and sharing too, just to express this, like there's certain things that I can feel myself tiptoeing around or like feel like are hot spots, for me. Um, which is
Totally.
such a great lesson. Like that's one of the reasons we wanted to do this podcast, right? Is so that we could um vulnerably work through things and show people that you
Yeah.
don't have to be perfect, right? Like you don't have to be in a perfect place or know what to say or say the perfect thing or do the perfect thing before sharing. I can feel that with this one for sure.
Oh, for sure. Like even me, I was just I'm trying to think of something positive to say,
Mhm.
but I don't have something super positive to say on that. And I was just like, no, I just need to be real about it. I just need to speak my truth. That's the whole point of this podcast, right? Like I'm not going to sit here and like not, I don't know. I mean, I can do it in a way that's like tactful and respectful. And so
Mhm.
I am trying to like tread lightly about things.
Sure.
Um, but yeah, I mean, there's also big parts of those pieces and that story and, my upbringing or my family dynamic that has affected me a lot. And unfortunately, a lot of it's been in negative ways or maybe not the best of light and that's just something, I mean, that's part of why I want to do this podcast. And for people that are listening, that it even resonates at all, I mean, people could really get something out of this. Because I know for me growing up, I would have loved to hear something like this. I would have loved to hear another person's story that was even a little similar to mine.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I mean, I think it's really important to be authentic and real in this. And but it does get uncomfortable. I'm not gonna lie. It does get uncomfortable in a couple of parts. I'm like, ah.
I go too far. Yeah. I think too, like being the peacekeeper in my family or like not rocking the boat and being the good girl, I take a lot of responsibility for other people's emotions. And that is
For sure.
another lesson. Yeah. And that's one thing
Yeah.
I know we've talked about with this podcast is like, it's not our responsibility to make people, to make sure people are okay, to make sure they hear it a certain way, to like cater to like others' emotions. And it's like, I definitely take a lot of responsibility for other people's emotions when I shouldn't.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and
Mm-hmm.
that's played like a huge factor for sure in just like my relationships in general, especially romantic relationships. I catch myself a lot now and I know I'm doing it. But yeah, it took me a long time to realize that was a thing because no one talks about it or no one
Yeah.
did with me. Like, 10 years of therapy. And then it's like, oh, yeah, by the way, like you're not responsible for your dad's anger if he gets mad at
Yeah.
you because you changed your name or something or your sister's outbursts or whatever. It's like,
Yeah.
wait, what? I don't know. It's profound. For me, it was.
No, for me too. I totally had that realization too, and it's huge. I think I even said to you earlier today when we were talking about doing this, filming this episode tonight, and I was just like, I'm going to try to be as respectful and tactful as possible. But if I'm telling my story and it offends someone or, sets someone off, like that sucks. I don't want that to happen. That's not the intention here, but it's my story. It's my story to tell. And I don't really, yeah, I don't, I don't want to have that responsibility on me of like, I have to just protect everyone around me and like not express, you know, what I've been through or whatever. And, you know, like I said, I can try to be respectful about it, but also I can see how that would be more of a difficult thing for you, honestly, because you have done such a good job at not rocking the boat this whole time. Where with me, I've already rocked the boat. I've tipped it the fuck over. Like there's no boat.
There's no boat anymore.
We're out at sea in a raft, bro. Like that's kind of where I'm at this point. So like we don't, when it comes to, you know, certain family members, in my immediate family too, but when it comes to certain family members, it's not, there's really not much of a relationship anymore at this point. So it's a little bit easier for me to be able to, you know, to say what I want to say or whatever, or to walk away, or to not like feel as so responsible for their emotions. That's kind of already been like worked through somewhat, and it's not, they're not really present in my life at this point, to be honest. So I don't really have to worry about that. So it does, I do definitely see how for you it would be a little more uncomfortable, a little more of a struggle there. I could totally see that.
I think
So.
because of our family dynamics being so different, we've definitely struggled with different kinds of things, which I think is why I like talking to you about it so much, though, because it's such a different perspective, you know?
It is, yeah. Like what kind of things were we, I remember we had a conversation about it. It was like years ago, maybe one of the first times that we really talked about it. And we were talking about like you being the youngest and how that's affected you, and then me being the oldest. And it was kind of weird because I was like, while you were talking, I was like, this is weird because I have the perspective of like, I'm the oldest by a long shot. And like, I have these way, way younger siblings. And so it was like this protectiveness, and it was just different. Like, I felt like I had to be like this leader for them and stuff. But for you, it's, well, it was just different how we were talking about. For you, you're the youngest by a long shot. So there were a couple of things that you were expressing to me, and I can't remember exactly what we were talking about, but it was really interesting because I was like sharing with you how like with my younger siblings, our relationship's rocky now, which is unfortunate, but that's more because of like our parental influence on that. My stepdad and my mom, that's more their influence on that. But yeah, we were talking about something specific, and I was like, oh my gosh, that is so interesting. That's probably like how my siblings feel. And you were saying something, but I was like, oh, that's probably like how my siblings feel. And it was a perspective that I had never really like looked into or like taken on, or I don't know. So it has been interesting talking about these family dynamics.
Yeah, I wish I could remember for sure, but
I wish I could too.
We talk so much.
We do. But when we talk about these other things, right, like our last podcast on fear and some of these other topics, I mean, these family dynamics influence us a lot, right? And so it's just kind of funny because even in the fear episode, I realized that it was just kind of interesting how those different perspectives showed up. We don't have the same kind of fears. Well, I was sitting there talking about fear of rejection, like it's crippling for me, like this fear of rejection, we both had fear of failure. Well, no, not even fear of failure. I have a strong fear of failure. It was more the fear of regret, like having regrets, like on our deathbed or whatever. That one was one that we both had, but most of our fears weren't similar.
Right.
Yeah, yours were more like, oh, I'm afraid of heights, or like singing in front of someone. Like, yeah, I wouldn't get on a microphone or whatever, but like, it's not like a super fear of mine. Like heights isn't really, I lied about it. It's not a fear of mine. Sorry.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I thought that was really interesting. And I bet that has a lot to do with our family dynamics, or where we felt like we got support in our younger years and where we didn't. you know, stuff like that will kind of show up in these other conversations, I think.
Yeah. I think it would be interesting. Like, I showed up a certain way for so long in my family. I don't know what it would be like to show up differently. I think that I have maybe tried to a couple of times. I have a couple of moments like lately that seem a little bit more, make me feel a little more hopeful. But yeah, I um I have a really big family, and so I think there's a lot of opportunity for discomfort.
I love how you
Like,
phrase that, opportunity. That's key. I love that.
yeah, my family can be very opinionated, and that's a very general statement because there's a lot of us, but we are an opinionated group, and um don't necessarily like to be told we're wrong. I did definitely get that trait. And I've worked through a lot, like I still work through that a lot and find myself, getting heated because I think in my family too, like being told, like having a differing perspective on something, I think they feel defensive, like someone's telling them they're wrong.
Yeah.
And so for a long time I felt that way. And like I didn't like being disagreed with because it's like basically like, oh no, you're just wrong, that's how it felt in my body. And then I was like, wait, no. Okay, like whatever's, we can disagree. We don't have to see things eye to eye, and still respect each other and love each other and move past that or whatever. And my family would get in like, they're loud. When I grew up, there was like screaming and yelling and like very like intense stuff sometimes. But they always would like come, then it's like, okay, well, like the 4th of July is next week. Let's all get together, It never like resulted in people going away. I think that's where our boundaries in our family are very harmful because I also have a lot of people in my family who struggle with addiction. And I mean, certain people in my family would like to say that's not correlated, but I'm just like, we have no boundaries, you guys.
Yeah.
None. Like, we could literally abuse one another and still feel like we had to show up tomorrow. Like, that's not okay,
Yeah.
Whether it's like verbal abuse or whatever, but it's just like interesting. It's, yeah, I know my natural instinct right now is to be like, it wasn't like terrible. We weren't like abusing each other every day, and we
Yeah.
for sure weren't. But I think, yeah, we could have done some good with like, I don't know, some boundary setting. I know I keep saying that word. I'm just obsessed with it.
Oh my God. Me too, though. Boundaries is so, it changes everything. Like once you really start like working on boundaries and like honoring yours and like setting them up or working on that, it kind of changes everything.
It really
And
does.
boundaries really does have a lot to do with, God, kind of everything, every aspect. I've always had a problem with boundaries at work, like at my jobs. Or like feeling like mine aren't being respected. That's always been a huge thing for me, like when it comes to jobs, which is kind of crazy, but there's just constant lessons there in it. But yeah, boundaries with family, boundaries with friends. I have such a lack of boundaries when it comes to my friends, which is kind of okay. That's kind of worked out for me because a lot of my friends have become my family at this point. I mean, known
Sure.
each other since elementary school. You have the same thing too.
Mm-hmm.
I know that you have friends from like you guys watched each other grow up,
From
part of each
kindergarten,
other's
from like
families.
6. Yeah.
Yeah, I have that too. So like really cool. But yeah, I mean, growing up, I was kind of like, oh, there's like a lack of boundaries here. Well, actually, no, I didn't look at it that way at all. But now, now I'm like, oh, there's a lack of boundaries there. Then like whatever, it worked. It was fine. There was something you said though that I was like, oh yeah, that's another huge difference with our families. You were talking about like, no matter what happened, no matter how bad things would get or whatever, no one would be like cut off. Like
Mm-hmm.
you wouldn't just like cut them off or whatever. You guys like deal with it or put up with them, or you have this like message that well, they're family. So no matter what they do, no matter what happens, you know, like you guys have more that mentality. My family, it's more, no, they're cut off. Like growing up, like, yeah, my mom, she'll cut you off and act like you don't exist. And that's kind of what I grew up around and saw. And it was really strange to me. It was really weird to me, because to me, I was like, family doesn't do that though. Like you don't do that with family. Like I thought that was really weird, but I know that it shaped a lot of my mentality, because now I'm not as, I mean, it sounds really bad to say, but like if there is a family member that's kind of like toxic about at all or whatever, like I can walk away. I don't feel indebted to them. I don't feel like, oh, I need to stay because you're family. I don't have that kind of mentality at all, which can be good, but can be bad. You know, I mean, it definitely can be seen either way, but,
I feel like maybe there's like a middle ground between our ways.
Yeah,
right?
Probably.
Like you don't have to stay 100% of the time, no matter what anyone is doing to you, but you also don't just walk away every time something is hard, you know, like
Exactly.
there's this middle place that me and you are like striving to. We're just like crawling our way out of these holes.
Yeah, it would be great to find a middle ground, because it doesn't mean that you have to like delete them and block them on social media. But
right, because you guys like different pies or something.
But yeah, my cousins on my mom's side though, I didn't really grow up like knowing that, like we never just would like call each other like, or talk to each other really outside of like family functions. I'd see them like once or twice a year, and that was it. And so every time I'd see them, it's like, are you still working at the optical place? No, I switched job, because you know I switched my job like every 2 seconds. So I was like, no, I'm working at this place now. Oh, okay, cool. But you're still in optical? Yeah, cool. You still live downtown Salt Lake? Yeah, I do. All right, yeah. And that was it. Like they didn't know anything about me. So if any of them are watching this podcast, they're probably like, oh my gosh, because like we didn't really grow up like super knowing each other well. It was really weird. But yeah, my friends, like they became my family. They actually kind of became my fill-in for relationships too sometimes. Like I'm not gonna lie. Like it just, because those relationships became so intimate for me that it was just like, it was kind of an all-encompassing thing. They weren't just my friends, they were like we were best friends, and it was like it almost felt like a romantic relationship even, or and like physically nothing was happening, but just like we were just so enmeshed. We would become so like involved in each other's lives and so enmeshed, and like anyway, that's a whole different podcast or whatever, but my friends are like my family basically too. So yeah, I was going to say though, with this family podcast, I definitely wanted to include that. Like, so I grew up as an only child, and it was just my mom and I against the world. It was kind of like starting out. It was kind of interesting in that way, because we've had this whole like journey to now where I have my brother and sister on my mom's side. And, you know, my mom isn't really a huge part of my life now. But I've been like really getting to know like my dad's side and all of that family now. That's been like a huge turning point and a huge part now in like my development, my life. I don't know. I feel weird saying development, because I guess I'm already developed.
Forever developing.
I'm like fully developed at this point.
Start writing erotica.
But out of it, I gained so much family. And I didn't know, like, there were times on this journey of life or whatever that I really just was at a real low, or I'd just be feeling so much pain, or so I mean, I'd cry myself to sleep. There's so many nights I've cried myself to sleep over, you know, just family dynamics and things like that. But now looking back, I'm like, oh my gosh. So I had my grandpa, who wasn't even my real blood. We haven't even talked about him yet. And he was such a huge.
Yeah.
But yeah, I had my grandpa who I cared for, and I ended up gaining his whole family out of all of this. And then so I have my mom's side. My mom's side has always, been there. I have my aunts and uncles and stuff like that. Cousins and stuff on my mom's side. And then my grandpa and his family. And then I have my one of my best friends since first grade and her family. I actually lived with them my senior year of high school, and they're still my family. And I gained them, and now I have my dad's family, my whole dad's side of the family, and I now have my in-laws. So out of all, and I mean, if you really want to get into it, I also have like all my best friends that I grew up with, right? So now I've got like my friend Alina. She's like my sister. I always tell people, like, she doesn't even feel like a best friend at this point. Like, she's my sister. So it's just so crazy how that's like come along, how it's like, I need to do one of those memes, like how it started and like how
it ended. Just 10 families.
How it is now. Because I literally, like, I'm all up in everyone's family now. Like, you didn't even know I'm a part of your family, girl. Like, I'm gonna be sitting there at Thanksgiving. No, I'm just kidding. But like, I really gained so much family and these like deep connections from this. So I mean, it's not all bad.
Speaking of family dynamics, my family is like big into drinking. Like, all of them have like, growing up, like all of our family stuff was drinking. Like, oh my gosh, like it's insane, to the point where I remember being a teen and being like, I'm never gonna drink. This is so dumb. Everyone gets so stupid when they drink. Like, I hated it. I hated alcohol. Fast forward to 21, and then we're getting drunk on ghost whiskey in Las Vegas, burning ourselves, getting fucking lost, whatever. Like,
we've had some time. Like, we've had some time. I'll just say that.
Yeah. I think but now I realize, I'm like, oh, like I don't ever drink anymore, like ever. And when I do, I can't drink much at all. Like, I have no tolerance, and I feel sick almost instantaneously. So it's like, what am I even doing? Why am I doing this? Which has been weird for the family stuff. Cause like, yeah, I'll get that whole like, come on, have some fun, relax with us. Why aren't you like being fun? And it's like, I'm a really fun person without alcohol. And
give me a chance. Hold on.
Yeah, it's coming out. Keep pressuring me, maybe not, but
put on some trap music. Give me about 4 minutes. Hold on, hang tight.
I know. I'm like, I don't know how. Yeah, it's interesting, because it's like, I think that's another thing is like, a lot of my family use that as a social lubricant for sure.
Yeah.
So shit, it's made for some real funny stories for us in our 20s, though. Bad behavior that we worked through, but it's awesome.
I do have bad behavior.
Yeah. I know that I kind of wanted to mention too, like, one other useful tool. We just keep dipping back into family dynamic. With me being like the good girl, I had a friend, Ruby Warrington, who like I had hired her to help me write my book for a little bit, and she told me about this book called The Normal One: Life with a Difficult or Damaged Sibling, by Jeanne Safer. I'll put that in the notes too. But I hate the title of the book because it sounds really bad, like The Normal One. But it was a really eye-opening book too, in taking like, it was pretty brutal, to be quite honest, like the normal or the good girl actually like playing into the role of the good girl for their own survival, because you could see what happened to the other family members.
Wow.
Like, that weren't accepted. they were like shunned. And so you would be like, oh, well, how I participated in also shunning like certain people because I wanted to continue to be in that little accepted group or whatever. And so that was a really interesting book for me to read this year. I was like, oh my gosh, like, yeah, definitely not from a victim standpoint of like, oh, my life's so hard. It was like, hey, how are you participating in making this worse? And it's like, oh my God.
Ooh.
Yeah. So that was a really good book that I wanted to like, I just slide into the
Slide into
conversation.
the DMs.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm glad that you brought that up. That's really cool. That's interesting. And when it comes to stuff that like is brutally like just kind of smacks you a little bit with the truth, I love stuff like that. I love it. Like I want to be jolted. So I love that because I think that's super interesting. There's definitely a part that we all play into, and a lot of times like without even realizing, or right when you stated that though, I was like, oh my gosh, that's probably kind of like what's going on a little bit with my family dynamic. Even I wouldn't be surprised, like with seeing how me, like the oldest one, has been like treated or shut out, that's going to affect my younger siblings. It's like, oh well, I'm not going to do that then. So
well, he
that's
talked about, or she talked about a lot of like the evolution of humanity being that like your survival was so dependent on your community, on your small tribe, that you did not want to be the one outside of that tribe. Like you would just die, and that we still kind of have these like natural instincts of survival. So it's like when you are accepted, you'll, push other people out just to keep your place kind of thing.
Yeah.
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 And so it's interesting. I know that one of the ways, like to call myself out here, that I do that, right, is like maybe talking behind, like if there's a certain person in our life, and I won't say who it is, but like is continuously kind of has issues and is causing like a lot of drama and stuff a lot of times. And so one of the ways that the book called me out is because like me and my other family members talk about this person behind their back all the time. It's like, oh my gosh, what did they do today? What did they say today? And it's like that is a means of like isolating them and not going to the problem and talking to them about it, yeah, which is interesting because like I thought I was having boundaries by like not being because I was like, oh, I don't want to keep like having this person in my life. But then I keep talking about that, So it is interesting how for survival reasons, sometimes I feel like I'm totally calling myself out on this, but yeah, I've definitely done it. And I try to be more aware of it now after reading that book. Like, oh gosh, like, is this actually helping anything? To like talk about it while they're not in the room? Probably not. The answer is no.
I definitely have things that I know that I've, contributed to as well. And yeah, it would be really interesting. I really would want to read that book and see like what my part in it has been, I guess, or I definitely know that I have like my survival type of instincts, or like my survival instincts definitely come into play and have ruined things before for me. So I know that I always have just certain behaviors or tendencies that I do that probably aren't the most healthy. So, and it's made really hard with like working with boundaries and stuff like that. So yeah. That's a cool book.
Yeah, it was really good. I really enjoyed it for sure.
Nice. Well, I have a book sitting here. This one's kind of specific though. It would be for like a specific type of crowd, I feel like. But I read it and I really loved it. got a lot out of this one, but yeah, this one's Daughter Detox.
Daughter Detox.
I don't know if you can see that very well. This one's
There we go.
Daughter Detox, recovering from an unloving mother and reclaiming your life. So this is more like working on the mother wound type of thing. But it's just really interesting because I've noticed that when a woman or a man, but when a woman has a mother wound, it's kind of like automatically assumed that whoever isn't the parent in the scenario, they did something to deserve that, you know? So it's like, well, what did you do? And this book was really, really good. It really helped me with that. So it's, the author is Peg Streep. And there's even little like activities that she has in here for you to do, like journaling type of things and stuff. But yeah, I thought that one was, I really like that one. I've read a couple of like mother wound type of books or whatever, but I got the most out of this one, out of the ones that I read. So I was just gonna give that one a quick little shout out too, I guess, just in case there's any listeners that, you know, have the mother wound. I don't feel like it's super common, but we're out here.
I think that it might be more common than we think. I find, I don't know if you find this to be true, but I do find that the women that I run into in my life are like bigger perpetuators of harming other women, if that makes sense. Like, I've had more women tell me things like, don't, you know, find someone that loves you more than you love them, for instance. Or I've had women say, like, don't cry within like the first year of being together because that's all they'll ever remember of you. Or like, I don't know, they'll say like really harmful things. And I'm like, oh my God, like, but I've never really had men in my family say very like far less things that are harmful to me directly, you know? And but I think it's because of they're wounded, like they're going to pass on their wounding and they may not realize they're doing it or whatever, but it's like, oh, that's really harmful, you know? Or like you're asking for it by like wearing that or doing this. It's like, I've heard that more from women than from men.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I'm like, what are you guys? I don't know. Like it is wild to me for sure, but
that's
I'm
wild
sure
to me too.
Yeah. I don't know if that's the same experience like that you've had, but I feel like more women say things like that than men to me.
I've had bad experiences with both women and men.
I mean, I have too, for sure. But I feel like women, like for me, women have said it so much more like nonchalantly, you know?
No, I totally get what you're saying. Like they perpetuate things. Like a lot of women have perpetuated that more so than men in your experience.
In my experience.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
No, I could totally see that when it comes to like women can be really harsh with like shaming. It's kind of crazy too, because, you know, becoming a mother, like all of a sudden I was getting mom shamed by all these other moms, you know, all these other women and moms. And I'm like, wait, aren't we supposed to be like supporting each other and like helping each other out? This is crazy. So no, I feel that. That's a whole other episode too. We could talk about just like women relationships and women dynamics.
I wanted to pull from my archetypes deck, which is just like, I know it's like all beaten up because I use it so much, but yeah. Like,
ooh.
Yeah.
That's pretty though. Colorful.
Yeah, I love it. It's by Kim Kranz. And yeah, so the card that I pulled is Thanatos. So let's see if we can get that in there for you. If you guys can see it.
Yeah, I can see it.
Yeah, so I'll read it right out of the book. Okay. Thanos is death. Okay. This is what it says. It's death. It is It is tempting to oversimplify death and sum it up as a transformation, but the true archetypal resonance of Thanatos cannot be easily assimilated or contained. Death is ongoing and omnipresent, an eternal response to the gift of birth. Witnessing the end of another being, creature, phase, or stage has deep consequences for the psyche. We are forever changed by Thanatos as it sweeps us under its wings, making us relinquish control in every form. It leaves a mark of ash upon our heart, signifying we have touched the cusp of the underworld and will return to the land of the living eventually, with more compassion and wisdom to share. This capacity is needed in our world. One who has faced the annihilation of Thanatos can face anything. When this card appears, it signifies an initiation into the underworld. When in light, it is grieving mourning, bearing witness to all that is. When in dark, it is fear or insensitivity to old age, illness, the dying. There are those with a great gift for navigating Thanatos energy. Thankfully, we find these generous souls in emergency rooms, hospitals, hospice centers, and the like. And facing Thanatos, death, leads us to the Aletheia, truth. Hey,
Ooh.
I feel like that is like really crazy for family dynamics. As I was reading that, I'm like, okay, just where was it? It was we're relinquishing control in every form. I was like, okay, as I'm sitting here trying to control everything that like I'm saying and doing.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh my gosh. But yeah, I love that card so much. That's amazing. I don't think I've ever pulled that card.
Oh, wow.
So, pulling that card with the energy of family dynamics, you guys, let's transform to a new era of family dynamics.
That is, I love that, how you tied that in. That's cool. That's actually also very Scorpio energy too, which you've got a lot of Scorpio influence right now. So yeah, the whole time you're reading that card, I was like, oh my gosh, this is so Scorpio season.
Yeah.
Like the stuff it was describing. So
cool. I know. And I'll show you guys like the book. It's just so beautiful. Like it has the writing and then like the picture on the other side.
Cool.
And, like the book is like so pretty. Yeah. I love this so much. It's just very beautiful colorful artwork for sure. Yeah. So
well, okay then.
That's the card pool. Death.
Death.
Just period. You're ending there. Literally ending there. Thank you everyone for listening. We really appreciate your time and spending that with us. And remember to be wise
and get weird.